my bitch best, but I'ma leave you on your ass taking up.
Yeah. What's the deal, everybody, man? This is Ricky Montoya checking in, aka the Fooest of all bears, and you are now tuned into I Think You're My Driver podcast, man. Thank you so much to everybody who has always pressed play anytime the episodes drop. So, of course, if you are not following me, that at ITYMD.podcast, that's going to be on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at. Now, before I move on a little bit too far, I decided that I was going to go ahead and start listening to some audiobooks. So shout out to Audible. And if you have that subscription, if you like to be a bookworm or you're one of those physical readers, regardless, if you have Audible, man, I'm on there as well, bro. So just check me out. Like I say, everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at. And as always, if you have a story that you want to share, you're a little bit too shy to get on camera with me, you're a little bit too shy to, call in on the phone or whatever the case, man, I got an email that's ITYMD.podcast, and that is at gmail.com, man. So thank you so much to everybody who has always pressed play every time I upload an episode or anytime you see it on the Spotify, man. So just to kind of get back into the roots where I initially started the podcast with, I'm actually going to go ahead and open up with a story that I found online on the, infamous site called Reddit. Now, with this story in particular, this story actually comes from a passenger that I found on Reddit. So this story reads, "This was the middle of the day. We got in and the car reeked of weed. The driver started the conversation off by saying how he would never get into a stranger's car because that is how you get murdered." We laughed and made some jokes, but he continued on and on about how you never know who has an axe in their trunk. We eventually just got quieter and quieter because he kept bringing up the murder. There were 4 of us, so I wasn't too scared because I figured he wouldn't be able to murder all of us during our 8-minute trip. We arrived safely, and I gave him 0 stars because the car smelled like weed. I was afraid he would find me and murder me if I told on him for the murder stuff. Now, in all honesty, man, I don't think it's really the worst idea for you to kind of report drivers for, like they say, suspicious behavior, because that's actually one of the little notations that you can leave. Of course, they do approach the driver about it, but at the same time, for those of you guys who have never driven for Lyft or Uber, they do not save the address where you are going. It's more of like a generalization, such as for my example, I'm out in Oklahoma City. So if I pick up in Edmond, Oklahoma, it's going to give Edmond, Oklahoma, zip code XYZ, drop off Oklahoma City, Oklahoma zip code. It doesn't give you exact streets. Now, of course, there's a lot of people who, when they've been somewhere once, they can go back there again. So it's not going to take too much to really go and hunt a lot of those people down. But at the same time, when people are having those kind of suspicious behaviors, I feel like it's very important to kind of report some of that head on. You never know who else is going to get in that car and going to be a victim when you escaped a situation such as that. Now, I've never really had a scenario such as that specifically. And I've, done my best as far as like being able that I avoid a lot of dangerous situations, thank the Lord, of course. But this one in particular, I had a passenger who was pretty normal for majority of the ride. It wasn't until the end of the ride where he just started to show his true colors. Probably a good thing. He told me a joke where he was like, "Man, I heard this joke from a driver where he was like, aren't you worried about the people who are going to pick up? Like, aren't you worried that you'll ever pick up a serial killer or anything like that?" Which the driver responds to say, "No, because what are the chances that 2 serial killers are in the car together?" And this passenger said it, let it breathe, and then just smiled and goes, "All right, man, well, you have a good rest of your day, sir." And it's just like one of those like, the fuck? Like, I'm glad you saved that for the end of the ride, but what made you think like, "Ooh, this one's going to take the cake. Try the veal." Like, get out of my car, bro. Go back to your job and do what you do on a regular basis. Like, this shit was weird. But it's like one of those things where I know that everybody is going to really show their true colors at the end because you don't know how weird that you can really be with new people. So it's perfectly fair. Now, moving on from that, the one thing that's also like very interesting is you never know what people are going through. You can't disregard people's feelings because you never know what people are going through, bro. Such as this one time where I actually picked up a group of 3 people. It was 2 women and a guy. And They get in the car. It was kind of late at night. I want to say it was probably about like 10, 11 o'clock or something like that. Might have even been earlier than that because I don't know what time the liquor store is closed. But I go and pick up this group of three people from this neighborhood that's like right on the other side of like 39th and I think that's May. Now, when I go and pick up these three people, the two ladies get in the back seat and the guy gets in the passenger seat. Not the biggest deal to me. And he gets in the car, they introduce themselves, I introduce myself, and we go on about our business, man. So, like I always say, start breaking the ice. How's the day been? What did you guys do today? And I asked him, I was like, hey, man, I was like, so how are y'all feeling tonight? And he was like, man, in all honesty, man, we're not doing that good today. I was like, oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that, man. I'm like, what makes you say that? He was like, man, he was like, we got some bad news last night, man. We had a very close friend of ours that actually passed away. And we got the news late last night whenever it happened, man. I was like, oh, geez. I'm like, I'm so sorry to hear that, man. He was like, yeah. He was like, he was a really good friend, man. He was a super good friend of ours. And as he says that, he buries his head in his lap and actually starts crying in my passenger seat. And like I say, you don't really know what people are going through and you can't disregard people's feelings. But it was one of those scenarios where I was like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, I don't know how to respond to this. And so I just kind of look up in the rearview mirror and I see the two girls in the back seat and they're, just vibing while this guy's kind of just bawling his eyes out in my passenger seat. And so, he sits back up and he was like, oh, he was like, so yeah, with that being said, man, that's why we're going to the liquor store right now, man. Like I say, even though he's not here anymore, we're celebrating his life, man. We're just doing this and doing that. He was like, and we've been drinking all day. So, got to re-up. I'm like, oh, fair enough, man. And so I was like, trying to keep like the conversation going. So I was like, oh, what do y'all like to drink? Are y'all beer drinkers? You like liquor? Do you like this? And he was like, man, he was like, I'm kind of just in the mood for whatever, man. He was like, but personally, he was like, I'm a Coors Light type of guy. He was like, I do a little bit of beer, a little bit of whiskey on these kind of occasions. He was like, so that's why we're going to the liquor store. So I can pick me up a bottle of whiskey for us all to enjoy the rest of the night. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. We get to the parking lot of the liquor store and, grab a parking spot. And they're about to close. I want to say it was like 10 minutes till closing. So they're like, oh, we got to get there. We got to go ahead and get out right now so we can do this. So the three of them go to walk towards the store door. One of the girls did not go in the store. She actually veered off and ran around the corner to the side of the building. And I saw her sitting on the curb. And that really puzzled me because I was like, okay, she didn't really say anything. The guy was doing most of the talking. So I was like, what in the world happened in the 50 steps that y'all took from the car to the door that made you veer off to the other side? And so I'm looking out of my side passenger mirror because I'm like, I need to assess the situation to know if I'm going to leave you guys or if I'm just going to go on about my business. So I see her sitting over there on the curb and, I kind of just like, oh, whatever. And I'm like watching both sides because the one thing, especially about nighttime, whenever you're driving, of course, it's very important for you to always be aware of your surroundings, but it's also very important to make sure that you don't have other random people trying to get in the car on their behalf. So watching everything out, and I see the girl, get up, and you can see that she's obviously like super upset, and she comes back to the car. And so I was thinking like, oh man, I was like, that was quick, trying to play it off like I wasn't paying attention. I was like, man, that was pretty quick. Like, did they like make the choice for you? And she's like, no, I didn't even go into the store with them. She was like, I haven't been feeling super good. And then, we get to here. So I was like, oh, if I have to throw up, I'm just going to step outside. That way I don't throw up in your car or anything like that. So she was like, I felt real bad. And I went and sat on that curb and I kind of threw up right there. And she was like, and, of course, I'm over here sick out of my brain and people are passing by. And she was like, these girls actually followed me outside of the liquor store to get into their car, and they're standing next to me, like pointing at me and laughing, like, aha, look at this dumb bitch. Like she's over here doing this and doing that. And she's like, man, like, sorry to be drunk right here. I'm over here throwing my brains up. Like, for all you guys know, I could have cancer or something. I'm just like, okay. And she was like, yeah. She's like, everybody's over here doing this and, making fun of me when I'm sick as hell. I said they didn't even have the empathy to figure out what's going on. And luckily for them, I'm really tired because I just got finished throwing up. She was like, I wasn't so tired and it didn't take so much energy out of me. I ought to just use my native powers on them and would have sent them with a curse. I kind of looked at her like, the fuck did I get myself into? And she was like, yeah, because using my native powers, it takes a lot of energy out of me. I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And so she's trying to like talk to me and whatnot, just having like small conversation. And she asked me, she was like, am I annoying you? And I was like, no, you're not annoying me. I was like, trust me, if you're annoying me, I would just tell you. And she was like, are you sure I'm not annoying you? And she reached like over my seat and put her hand on my shoulder. And I kind of just looked at her hand and she was like, uh, I'm just going to go back into the store. And I was like, yeah, you do that. You do that. It's one thing for you to question about how comfortable somebody is. But in my opinion, if you want to gauge somebody's comfortability in a situation, don't touch them, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, keep your hands to yourself. Now, she gets out of the car. I see her go back towards the door. As she's going to the door, her two friends are walking out of the liquor store. So I'm like, cool. It's perfect. That means I can go ahead and just get these, dumbass people back and we can go on about our business. The three of them get back into the car, all get buckled in and everything. And the guy in the front seat and one of the girls that was sitting behind him, I think, they kind of were like bickering back and forth, but like in a funny way. And they were like, oh, they didn't have this in there. We were looking for this and they ran out of stock in X, Y, and Z. And they're like, dude, like, if I give you like $10 right here, is it okay if we just stop at that on cue that's right up the street? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And they're like, oh, dope. You're so awesome. Like, today's been such a tough day. Like I said, my friend passed away and all that other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, man, no, it's fine. And I'm like, nah, bro, it's all good, man. You guys are actually probably going to be my last ride of the night. I'm kind of ready to go home. It's been a long day, man. And they're like, man, I feel you, dude. I'm like, so what do you do, man? Is this your full-time thing? I'm kind of just like, yeah, I'm very generic when it came to that kind of stuff because I think it's very important for you to not give a whole lot of yourself. So I'm telling them, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of my side hustle. I do X, Y, and Z as my day job. This is something that I just kind of do just to pick up a little bit of extra money. And today was just one of those nights. And they're like, no, I feel you, man. And he's like asking me like, man, you guys get a lot of weirdos? And I kind of like look up and I made eye contact with the girl who said she was talking about her native powers. And I was like, for sure, man. I get plenty of weirdos on a regular basis. And he was like, oh, I bet, dude. I fucking bet, man. He's like, man, I couldn't do this and that. And I was like, oh, fair enough. So pull into the on cue parking lot. And he was like, you sure, man? You sure you don't need anything, bro? And I was like, nah, man. And I I was like, I got my water, man. Everything's perfectly fine, but I appreciate the gesture, man. He was like, okay, cool. He's like, man, I'm gonna make it real quick. I don't want to, take up too much more of your time. So the girl behind him gets out with him, and the other girl with the native powers decides that she's gonna sit in the car. And as they're getting out and they're going towards the store, she was like, today's been such a this. And she was like, I kind of regret last night. And I was like, what do you mean you regret last night? And she's like, well, that guy that's sitting in the passenger seat, that's my boyfriend. And the three of us had a threesome last night. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah. I mean, and I was like, so what made you had a threesome? And I was like, so that's your boyfriend? And she was like, that's my best friend. I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, so what made you guys have a threesome? She was like, because I think girls are hot and this and that. But she was like, that was a big fucking mistake letting them do that. And she was like, because they've been bickering all day, like they're the ones in a married relationship. And literally, as she's saying this, they're coming out of the store and the boyfriend and the best friend are like arguing back and forth about nothing. And so I'm sitting there like, bro, what the fuck did I get myself into? Probably shouldn't have announced that this was going to be my last ride of the night, is what I'm thinking to myself as they're getting back into the car. So they get back into the car. The dude's in the passenger seat. The other girl is behind him, I want to say. And as they get into the car, the other girl, she starts to reach over to me. And he was all like, man, like, thank you so much, man. Like, are you sure you didn't want me to get you anything out of the store, man? He was like, I know I just got back into the car, but I can go back in there. And I was like, bro, you're fine, man. Like, thank you, man. Thank you. But I don't need anything, man. And the girl behind him decided, she was like, are you sure you don't need anything? She was like, because I can definitely give you whatever you want. And I'm like, man, I'm cool. I'm cool. And they're like, oh, like, I know you said this was going to be your last ride of the night, man. Like, you sure you don't want to come party with us, man? And she was like, yeah, you should come party with us. I definitely got something that you could take for sure. And I was like, I'm like, you know what, man? I was like, I appreciate the gesture. I really do. But you guys are probably going to be the last ride of the night because I'm ready to go home and go to sleep. He's like, no, that's fair, man. That's fair. He was like, shoot, like I said, man, my friend passed away last night. So we're just really just going to be drinking for the rest of the night. But you know what? He was like, if you don't want to come hang out with us, that's perfectly fine with me, man. And so we drive around the corner. They were literally like 2 minutes away from this gas station. And I get in front of their house. The same girl that was trying to invite me inside, she was like, are you sure you don't want to come in with us? Like, you would have so much fun if you came in with me. And he was like, Amber, shut the fuck up. He said he wasn't going to come in with us. Just shut up and go the fuck inside. I was like, whoa. I was like, what did I get myself into? But it was one of those scenarios where I was like, you know what? That's what happens when you announce your moves. It's very important in life that you really don't announce your moves, because even though it seems very harmless, a lot of the times you can kind of invite yourself for a lot of spirits that you're not really ready to deal with. And I mean, I'm not really one to judge a lot of the people and the way that they act with themselves, especially when they're under the influence or whatever the case. But it's like one of those scenarios to where you got to kind of keep a lot of your conversations to a minimum. Because even though people are being vulnerable with you, that doesn't mean that you got to be comfortable enough to become vulnerable with them, because you never know who you get into the car with. Like the like the story said, you don't know if you're getting into the car with a murderer who has an axe in his trunk. Like, you just never know who you get in the car with, man. Moving on from that, staying on the same subject as far as like drinking, when it comes to you doing this Lyft and Uber, there's, I want to say, 3 or 4 people that you're going to end up picking up. There's the people who are just, traveling in for work. They're leaving town for work. There's the people who don't really have a vehicle, so they rely on Lyft and Uber to get to and from places. They're the people who are drunk as hell, or the people who are bar hopping. In this particular scenario, this was one of those bar hopping nights. I want to say it was probably like a Saturday night, like 11 to like 12 o'clock at night or something like that. So I'm sitting outside this bar that I want to say is like off of Western. It was one of those like places I just never been to. And so I'm sitting in the parking lot, and it's one of those ones where they're really, really slow poking and getting into the car. But I get it, you want to finish your drink or whatever the case. So lady comes out, and I had my windows down, and she was like, oh, she was like, hey, are you such and such? I was like, yeah, that's my name. She's like, oh, I'm such and such. Nice to meet you. And she's circling around, and she just opens the passenger door. She was like, is it okay if I sit up here? I'm like, sure, why not? Go for it. You already opened the door. Buckle in, get comfortable. Let me know if I can point the vent towards you or whatever the case. And she gets in the car, and she's like, oh, thank you so much for not being a weirdo. She was like, it's so weird. She was like, I have a thing about like sitting in the back seat with a bunch of people that I don't know. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. So I was asking her, I was like, so how's the night been for you? And she's like, man, tonight has been real cool. She was like, I'm just leaving that place. She was like, have you been there before? I was like, no. I was like, in all honesty, I was like, I kind of keep my going out to a minimum. Plus, I don't really drink. She's like, what? You don't drink? She was like, what are you, underage? What are you, like 19, 18? She was like, you look real young. I was like, nah. I was like, I'm of age, but I was like, I just personally pass on the drinking. She was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's fair. And she was like, not me. She was like I said, I'm drunk as fuck. I'm about to actually go meet my friends at this bar. I don't remember the name of the bar, but she was like, I'm about to go meet my friends at this bar. And, Saturdays and Sundays are like my time off. I'm like most people. Okay. And she's like, yeah, like on Saturdays and Sundays, a couple of my friends, we like to get together and just go bar hopping. And tonight, we were supposed to go bar hopping, but they left me alone in downtown. So I decided like, oh, whatever. It's okay. I'll meet up with you guys later on in the day. And that's what brought me to this place. But she was like, we're about to go meet up in that place over there in Edmond. And we're just about to go drinking or whatever. She was like, I know what you're thinking. Like, if we're all supposed to be bar hopping or friends and hanging out together, wouldn't it be best for you guys to leave together in the same Uber? And she's like I said, I left them because they left me. So that's why I'm just getting into the car with you for you to take me to my destination. She's like, it doesn't really seem like a big deal. My mom doesn't agree though. I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I tell my mom about how I like to go on like my weekend activities of just going hard because, like I say, I got to reward myself. And so that's why I do these excursions like this on the weekend. My mom really doesn't like that I do this. She's like, oh my gosh, what's your problem? Like, you just go out on the weekends, you get drunk as shit, And then you get into the car with all these strangers. Like, I'm so concerned and so worried about you. Like, aren't you worried that somebody is going to try to like kidnap you and murder you? And she was like, no, like, mom, I can defend myself. I can do this. I'm more than willing to, defend myself if it comes down to it. With that being said, Ricky, I will stab you in your fucking throat if you try some shit with me. So I was like, what the fuck do I do this shit for? And so I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, so, what kind of music you want to listen to? Let's go ahead and just change the subject really quick. And, I know like hearing a lot of this stuff is like one of the things like, shouldn't you have just ended the ride right then and there? I agree with you. I agree with you entirely. I definitely should have, but it was one of the things where I was just like, if I change the subject and she tries to bring it back, we'll take it from there. But like I say, I changed the subject to, ooh, what you want to listen to? Because she's drunk. And she's like, oh my gosh, do you have this on your playlist? Like, do you have an aux cord I can hook my phone up to? And I was like, I mean, and she's hitting the buttons on my radio. She's like, oh, what the hell? What's wrong with your radio? I was like, oh, that doesn't even work. And she's like, what the fuck? What kind of Uber are you if you don't have an Uber? And I pick up my little Bluetooth speaker and I'm like, this is what I got. And she's like, oh, whatever. She's like, I'm not even going to go through the trouble to connect my Bluetooth. She was like, you got Apple Music? You got Spotify? I'm like, yeah, I got both. What do you want to hear? And so she starts putting in some bullshit, some Taylor Swift, Lady Antebellum, and all them other bands, Saturday night party music or whatever the case. And so we're just driving on about our business. She's telling me about her job and telling me about how she used to have a boyfriend and how she left her boyfriend because he wasn't doing enough for her and was getting mad that in the same scenario that we are in of getting into the car with random people while you're drunk as shit on a Saturday night. And she was like, it really bothered him that I did that. And I'm like sitting here thinking about it, like, man, there's so many people around you who have all these concerns. To think at a certain point you would kind of have it in you to just be like, you know what? I have all these people who are so concerned about what I do in my personal life and they have so much of an opinion to say, I should listen to it at a certain point. No, this lady did the complete opposite and just continued to tell me two or three different scenarios about her mom, her ex-boyfriend, and one of her best friends getting mad that she gets into the car with random people. 30 minutes down the road, I drop her off and we go on about our business, man. And it was like one of the things to where I'm like sitting there thinking to myself, why am I doing this late? And what's even kind of, not funny, but funny at the same time, I had another eye-opening experience in that same night. I was going to pick up another passenger, and in that same breath, I was about to turn somewhere that was not able to turn to where I needed to go to. So, thinking it's like late at night, not a whole lot of cars on the road, I went ahead and just swerved the other way to get into the other turning lane that was probably about 100 feet up front. Unbeknownst to me that there was actually a cop following right behind me. So I got pulled over that night. Cop gets up on me, they flash their lights, and I make that turn into where I was initially going to turn to. And as I'm like pulled in right there into somebody's driveway, if I'm not mistaken, cop gets right behind me and she hops out so quick, like not even like fully putting the car into park. She jumped out and she walks up to my window. She's like, well, nice to meet you, sir. How are you doing today? And I was like, I mean, I'm doing pretty good. I'm kind of lost over here. And she's like, really? She's like, so that's why you're driving like that? She's like, are you sure you're okay? And I'm like, yes, ma'am. I'm sure I'm okay. And she's like, okay, well, I just need your license and insurance and I'll be right back for you. So I'm like, okay, cool. And it's kind of late at night, like I say, completely understandable because I did make a really dumbass turn. But at the same time, it was one of those scenarios to where I was like, I don't really think this is that necessary for you to do this. And as I'm thinking that to myself, a second cop car actually pulled up behind her car. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, oh, like this could end really, really bad. So I'm like trying not to do like a whole lot of fidgeting. I didn't even want to reach for my phone or anything, which was so hilarious because the person that I was supposed to pick up was in the next parking lot over. And I'm sure he was looking outside of the balcony of that bar that I was supposed to be picking up to look at this, young kid in a white car getting pulled over by two police officers because not a whole lot of good results come out of seeing somebody who is getting pulled over by two different police officers. To make matters worse, as I'm sitting there waiting for her to come and, print me out this ticket or for whatever she's going to do, another cop car pulls up. And I'm like, bro, like, I didn't even do shit. But it was another sign of like, take your ass home, fool. What are you doing out here, man? So that third cop car pulls up, and within a couple of minutes she finally comes out there and comes up to my window back with my license and my insurance. And she's like, okay. She's like, everything's all good. She's like, I'm not going to give you a ticket or anything. I just wanted to give you actually like a formal written warning just to let you know that, like, you should pay attention and probably use your turn signals if you're going to be doing that. Or, maybe pay attention to the directions so that way you can get to your destination safely. I was like, what? I'm like, that's rude ass cop. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and let it be because it was late at night. That could have ended so bad when that third cop car pulled up. And I just said, you know what? Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your night. And I pulled off and I went straight home because I was like, you know what? If that's not a sign, I don't know what is, bro. And I think it's very important for you to always pay attention to the signs because you never, ever know what you are going to get yourself into. Like I say, man, it's very important for you to always pay attention to the signs because you never know what you're going to get yourself into, but you also never know who is getting into the car with you, bro. So this last story that I'm going to give right before I cut this episode short, I had another scenario where I picked up this lady from, I want to say it was like an extended stay or like one of those type of places. And she gets in the car, introduces herself, start having a little bit of small talk. And I'm asking her, like, I said, so, you got a pretty big plans for the rest of the day? What's on your calendar? And she's like, nah, man, I really don't, man. She's like, in all honesty, I kind of just got out of jail a couple of days ago. She's like, I'm just kind of getting back on my feet. I was like, oh, okay. I'm sorry to hear that. And she was like, yeah. She was like, I'm just sorry about where I'm supposed to go to. And I'm like, okay, like you paid for the ride to go somewhere, but whatever, right? And so she's telling me, she's like, yeah, I just got out of jail a couple days ago. So I'm like, just kind of just getting back to all my contacts and getting back to where I'm supposed to be in life. And mind you, I'm looking at the destination where we're going. I'm pretty familiar with this hotel and the street that we are going to. It's not really registering to me as what she's trying to say. And she's like, yeah, like I'm supposed to go, to go see one of my friends over here at this hotel. She's like, I really, really don't want to go here. Like, but I'm already heading this way. I already paid for the Uber. So it's like, I might as well just go ahead and go. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, if you want to stop the ride and drop off somewhere, just say so. But I'm just kind of like maintaining. I was like asking her, I'm like, so why did you pay to go to a place if you didn't want to go? And she was like, like this is like one of my friends. He bailed me out actually. So it's like I kind of have to go see him just to be like, oh, thank you for bailing me out, check in with him or whatever the case. And none of this is registering me as to what she could be possibly talking about because I'm like, lady, as long as you get out of my car, I don't care where you're going or what you're doing with your life. Now, as we're driving down the road, she's telling me about how, man, I saw this in jail, or like, I'm not even from here. I'm originally from, I think she was from Vegas or like Arizona or some of those. So there's a lot of these little, what you want to call it? There's a lot of these little breadcrumbs that she's dropping to me to let me know of the loaf that she is dealing with, but it is not registering to me whatsoever as to what she is trying to say. And so I was like, oh, okay. What brings you out here? And she's like, man, she's like, this same friend I'm about to go see. She's like, he moved me out here. She's like, we lived out in Arizona together and decided like, oh, let's move somewhere else. And, here we are in Oklahoma. And she's like, but that's what I get for listening to other people and following people elsewhere. Cause, like I say, I just got out of jail. And I'm like, okay. And so I was like, like, oh, what did you like? What do you like about Oklahoma? What's making you stay here? And she didn't really have a whole lot of good things to say, but she was just like, the best thing is that it's, pretty cheap. Hotels are very cheap, especially when you're new to a place and you can't really get things or you don't have a license or good work history to get an apartment. Living in hotels is always so much easier. Like I say, all these breadcrumbs that she's dropping and nothing is registering to me as to what she's trying to tell me. And we're driving down the highway. And she was like, yeah, I'm supposed to go see my friend, like I said. Unbeknownst to me, she's giving me all these little hints as to, what she does in her life or, the destination that she's going with to kind of let me know what kind of person that she is. Me being just oblivious and just ready to go home, I really could give a fuck about what she's trying to tell me. I'm just like, man, let's just go on about our business. And she was like, yeah, like I say, I'm going to go see my friend, just kind of giving my thanks for, bailing me out and helping me get back on my feet. But she's like, I really don't want to go see him. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, yeah, but me, being like really indecisive and stuff like that, I really don't even like the outfit that I put on. And she's like, so that's why I have this backpack. I just, grab this and put this on. And she's like, I don't even like the shoes that I put on, this and that. But luckily I got all these other outfits. So if I wanted to change, um, but she's like, I don't want to change in the car or anything like that because like I don't know you or this and that. And I kind of was like, I mean, I'm not going to force you to do something that you don't want to do. If you want to wait until you get to your destination, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine as well. Like I say, it's completely up to you. And I'm not going to tell you what you can and cannot do. It's just like, okay, so like I can change in here if I want to. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. Cause, we're on the freeway, we're driving. I'm really not like trying to be looking back and like, oh man, what you got going back there? Or what you got under them jeans? I was like, okay, like I say, man, nothing is registering to me as to what she's trying to tell me, fool. So she was like, okay, whatever. And she's like, I could hear her like, ruffling her little jeans and shit like that. She's like, oh my gosh, I've never changed in an Uber before. And I was just like, yeah, I guess it's the first time for everything, right? And so she gets her little outfit. She's like, yeah, I think this is a better outfit. She's like, I like these shoes way better. I like these pants way better. Like, oh, that was cool. She was like, thank you for not being weird about that. Like, I've never changed on an Uber before. And I was like, yeah, you're just trying to go to your destination. I get it. You're trying to look presentable or whatever the case. She was like, oh yeah, it's whatever. I just want to thank you. I really do. I was like, yeah, whatever. Thank you for paying for the ride. I'm kind of trying to keep it generic because I was like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me, but I'm going to keep it at a very generic note for the remainder of this time until we get to your destination. So get to this destination. We pull into the parking lot. And even then she was like, oh, like, I don't really want to go see him. I don't want to go upstairs, but we're here already. So fuck it. Right. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm like thinking to myself, get out of my car. And so I unlocked the door. She's like, all right, well, thank you so much for the ride. Hope you have a good rest of your day, whatever the case. And so she gets out of the car and I'm like thinking to myself, like, never in a million years did I think I would never in a million years did I ever think I would encounter somebody who would be comfortable enough to change in the back of a seat with a stranger. But also at the same time, it finally started to kind of click to me to where I was like, you just got out of jail. We're going to a hotel. And you talked about how this person bailed you out, so now you're going to go give him your thanks. I'm not trying to jump to conclusions here or anything of that sort, but being comfortable enough to change into the backseat of a car while leaving a hotel to go to another hotel because you don't want to go back there. There's only a couple type of people here that are, in this type of playing field of comfortability. Like I say, man, I don't like to jump to conclusions because you don't know what people are going through at the end of the day. You got to allow people to be vulnerable enough, but also at the same time, don't allow people to change in the backseat of your car, fool. Because you know what, man? You're opening a whole other Pandora's box that a lot of people are really not prepared to get the keys to, man. Yeah, man. Like I say, man, it's very important for you to not step on people's feelings because you don't know what people are going through at the end of the day. But it's also very important to where if somebody's being vulnerable with you, to not allow yourself to open up your vulnerability because some people will use your vulnerability to their advantage because, like I say, even though you don't know what somebody's going through, you also don't know what's on people's minds and what their agendas are when they are getting in the car with you, bro. So, I'm just going to kind of close out on that note to let you know that, empathy is a very great trait to have when you're in this type of line of work as far as service work. But also at the same time, you don't have to allow people to have every bit of empathy that you have. When you open your heart, having a big heart, you're more than likely to get hurt or get your heart stepped on when you allow yourself to be unnecessarily vulnerable with people or when you become too trusting/naive. If there's one thing that life has taught me, man, trusting people too easily and being naive can get you hurt, can get you robbed or whatever you want to say. There's a lot of things that can come out of that. So it's very important that you know when to put a cap on those feelings and when to know of what's real and what's not. I was actually having a conversation with my wife about this the other day. I thought about this one day in the midst of doing Uber and Lyft in the couple of years that I did it, to where it's like, you're in the car with a stranger and vice versa. People are getting into the car with a stranger. So you don't know what's real and what's not. For all these people know, I could have made up these stories about me being a part-time Uber driver and working for XYZ company at the time whenever I would get in the car with these people. But it's vice versa for the other people, man. When they're getting into my car, I don't know what they really do. These people could be, these call center agents. They could be a person working at McDonald's or whatever the case. But you never know what people are going through and the lengths that people are willing to go to give themselves an advantage or make themselves feel better about where they are in life. So don't allow yourself to be accessible to somebody else's pain, because hurt people do hurt people, but it's up to you at the end of the day to put a stop to what people are trying to do, because you don't have to become a victim of somebody else's pain. There's always jokes that, a couple of my homies say, be like, man, why I got to take responsibility for what you go through, bitch? But at the same time, when you insert yourself in a scenario, in a sense, you kind of take responsibility, because when you are mending other people's scars, or you're taking the time to open a space of vulnerability for people to feel comfortable, it's also your job to play the part of either being a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on, or telling them to get the fuck on. All right, man. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and close this one out, man. Of course, you're not already following me. That is at itymd.podcast. It's on Instagram. It's on TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music Podcasts, and everywhere else that you can enjoy podcasts at. Of course, signing off on this one. This is Ricky Montoya, a.k.a. the Foo Bear.
150 on a dash.
And I do thank you so much for tuning into my podcast, man.
That's 5-0 on your ass. Don't get stuck. My shit blasting up. Window tinted, can't get caught. My bitch bad, sport more